So, as I mentioned, you've had several acts of sabotage in the last weeks inside Syria. Well, I mean, not just the last weeks. This has been happening for decades. But in the last weeks in Iran, they blew up the Natanz nuclear research facility. You had 7 ships that were on fire on the same day. And today as well, look what happens. Fire breaks out at Iranian industrial area. No casualties. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? This is near Tehran. Okay? It's about 12 hours ago. This story is from about 12 hours ago. No casualties, alhamdulillah. That's good. And as you can see, as I just pointed out, there have been several other incidents at facilities in the past weeks, including a fire at the underground Natanz nuclear facility last month, which caused significant damage. And Israel indirectly, covertly took credit for that. We know it's that, man. It's a nuclear research facility. I mean, they've been targeting these things for decades. They used to go and conduct airstrikes on Iraq's nuclear facilities. They've been doing that on Syria's alleged nuclear facilities. They've been sabotaging Iran's nuclear program for years now. The Stuxnet virus is just one method, right? Among others. They've also conducted airstrikes in Iran. Israel love violating other countries' sovereignties, right? They're the only ones that are allowed to have sovereignty, and you have to respect their borders and their right to exist. But everyone else, fuck you. Wow, some democracy, right? So this is also suspect as hell. And just to remind you, in an explosion at a medical clinic in the north of the capital, Tehran, in July 19th. In July, 19 people were killed. So not only did you have the fires on those 7 ships and the nuclear research facility, but today, the same day that the port in Beirut blows up in one of the most insane explosions I've ever witnessed, you're telling me you had another industrial accident in Iran? Since, they're saying that the thing in Beirut was allegedly nitrate. Allegedly. Some fishy, man. Like, how can you look at this shit and be like, oh yeah, it's totally random? No, it's not. You are irrational to think that these things are just coincidental. That's the irrational thing to do. You cannot look at this objectively. Look at the airstrikes that Israel conduct on a regular basis. Look at the way that Israel sabotages their neighbors on a regular basis and then be like, oh, this is a coincidence. No, motherfucker. Listen, let me explain something to you. When you hear about an act of sabotage or you hear about some extremely huge industrial accident in the Middle East, Israel are guilty until proven innocent. Okay, you should assume by default that Israel did it. If it's in Iran, if it's in Lebanon, if it's in Syria. Yes, because these countries do not recognize Israel. These countries support the Palestinian cause. These countries are constantly being ravaged and targeted by Western imperialism and by Zionism. These countries do not have the same capabilities financially, militarily as Israel. They can't even defend themselves properly. They're being targeted by sanctions. They're being targeted by arms embargoes. They're being targeted, even being starved, having their crops burnt, denied medicine. They are victims. They are targets of Zionism and imperialism and have been for decades. That's a fact. You are an idiot to look at the contemporary evidence, at the historical context, and then deny the possibility, the very strong likelihood that this is a foreign act of sabotage. That's the irrational thing to do. It's like burying your head in the sand. Seriously, man, like, they just don't get it. You have to understand something, man. Even people on the so-called left, pundits and journalists, whatever, progressive, I don't care what they call themselves. They don't understand this because they don't know these regions. It's like they want to interject. They want to have a say. Like they want to talk about Syria and Afghanistan and Iran and all these countries. And they want to pretend that they know what they're talking about. But they don't know these countries. They haven't lived in these countries. They haven't lived under occupation or through a war. They don't know what terrorism is. They don't know what being bombed by Israel is. They don't know these things. They lack the information and the context and the experience to comment on these things. They don't know their asses from their elbows. So it is, and once again, I think it's a very racist thing. I think it's a very revealing and telling thing for someone in the West to just go like, oh yeah, of course it's an industrial accident. It's a third world country. Oh really? Fucking unreal, man. I swear to God.